So once again, welcome to this session where we are going to speak about the CISM's exam strategies and practice questions. So a little bit about InfoSec Train. So this particular institution was established in 2016, one of the finest in security and technology trainings. We are also into consulting, technology and security consulting. We conduct wide range of professional programs, both online and offline as well, and we do it with corporate as well, right? Directly to corporate. Um, a few of our trusted customers and clients, you can see, it's a wide range and pretty big names there where we actually have provided or do provide our training programs. So why InfoSec train? So number one, we have all certified and experienced instructors. Okay, and unlike majority of the training providers out there, where we differentiate is number one, we provide flexible modes of training. We provide so there is a lot more available for people who take the direct trainings, and we are learning partners with Microsoft, CompTIA, ISACA, PECB, C Council, IAPP. So different global accreditations we actually have partnership with, and we provide trainings on that. So my name is Nishikant, and I have around 20 years of experience. Um, I have been training. This is my passion. Training is my passion. I have 20 years of work experience per se, but what I do, whether it is during weekends or even otherwise, mentoring and training is where I believe that while I am imparting knowledge, I also get a chance to learn, specifically the professional certifications, whether it is a CISSP or a CISM or ISO 27001 or any other frameworks like COVID or NIST. I do that because I get to both impart my knowledge and also learn from people. Um, so I'll be the one who would be going through this session today. So what are we going to cover as part of this, today's session? Um, the content and certain basics in terms of preparation. A few sample questions. Uh, Slightly different from what you generally go through. Um, the most important aspect when it comes to CISM, thinking like a manager. A quick review into the different preparation related resources that we recommend that you all go through. So coming back, a quick recap into, if though you have gone through it, I just saw only few thumbs ups, or I did not have any raised hands. So information security governance, information risk management and compliance, information security program development and management, information security incident management. So effectively, four domains is what CISM basically covers, with the 17, 20%, 33%, and 30% respectively, the overall weightage. That's what is the course content, right? Now, of course, we're not going to go through what each domain is all about, uh, because we're going to specifically speak about what you need to pay attention to, right? So similarly, a very quick recap into the exam itself. 150 multiple choice questions which you need to complete over 4 hours. It is a proctored exam, right? Which means somebody is actually watching you over a video cam, right? And there are two stages, or rather three stages, that you need to basically be called as a certified information security manager. One is successfully pass the exam, and then you have to adhere or agree to the ISACA code of professional ethics, and then you also have to agree to comply with these ISACAs and slash CISMs continuing education policies, and then you have to submit a verified evidence of or verifiable evidence of 5 years of work experience in the field of information security, specifically in at least 2 or 3 domains of the CISM course content, and then you would be earning the certification. Okay, so merely passing the exam is not going to get you the the certification itself. Okay, and the qualification to earn CISM certification, or rather passing the exam, we have to look at it. Number one, your overall score. Now there is a scaled score, as in overall Isaka basically uses a scale of 200 to 800, and when you are attempting, uh, generally in each of the 4 domains you need to score 450 or higher to pass overall, right? And then in some scenarios, it also looks at every single domain, you have to score 450 plus. So, and overall also it should be 450 plus. Okay, how exactly the calculation is done in the backend, as in 150 questions, how exactly the weightage is split, sorry, basis the weightage, the overall score is split, domain wise. That is something which no one knows. That's proprietary to Isaka. But one of the best ways and the easier ways that we speak to whenever we are into training and when we are speaking with people, what we recommend is when we are practicing, consistently score or consistently aim at scoring 135 or 240 of 150 questions. When you keep on practicing that, whichever whatever is the question bank or question paper that you are doing, and then slowly and steadily that thought process is something that you get aligned with, is where I would say it gives you that confidence that yes, you can actually score, right? So there is no 75%, 80% business there, right? Now, with respect to the exam in itself, right? So the exam is a test of your judgment, okay, and a test of your understanding of terms. Now, I'm not really sure how many of you were told that when you are appearing or when you are uh, going through this particular training session and preparing for the exam, the importance of terms and the glossary is very important, right? So you need to make sure that you understand the terms, right? Critical thinking, common sense. Don't deviate or don't uh, extrapolate and overanalyze any question. Your experience with respect to that particular thought process, um, your ability to synthesize that particular question, and the most important part is 150 questions which are all multiple choice, so you are effectively picking the best of the available answers, or the best of the bad lot, as we like to call it. Okay, so there are no right answers, there are just best answers. You need to avoid over analyzing, avoid analysis paralysis. Okay, uh, making sure that you are timing the questions when you are practicing, it becomes very important, because generally 150 questions over 240 minutes, generally the time is enough, right? Make sure that you are, there will be certain questions which are like a triage questions, as in you should be able to see. Generally, there would be certain questions where there would be like a triage kind of a question, so you need to pay attention to that. And when you are selecting and picking the answers, right, you need to make sure that you look for the most encompassing answer amongst the given answers, and we'll go through a few sample questions on that, right? What we advise generally is that every 50 questions, you take a break, okay, so that it doesn't really overwhelm you, and you don't start, you don't get completely sucked into that analysis part of things, right? So this is generally what we advise. But again, to each their own methods. This is something which majority of the people whom we have advised to, including myself, right? Even today, when I'm giving any of these certifications, this is the method that I follow. Okay, and generally the timing is enough, right? 1 hour, 50 questions. I take a 10-minute break, and then again an hour, 50 questions. I take a 10-minute break, and then again an hour and 50 questions, and then you're done. Actually, right? 3 hours you're done, but here you have 4 hours, right? So that's what it is. Why we recommend that you take a break. Okay. Few terms when it comes to certain questions, um, you have to pay attention to. Like for example, when they use the words like criticality, okay, or when they speak about important, right? There could be substitutes: sensitivity, confidentiality, impact, consequence. So when they speak about a probability of an event, right? Threat multiplied by vulnerability, right? So sometimes they could ask the question in an indirect way, right? Instead of calling it and terming something as a risk in itself, they could address that part more from a threat or more from a vulnerability perspective, right? So you have to pay close attention to these questions whenever whichever question that you are reading, right? And you should not assume anything. Don't assume, right? If it's not there in the question, you don't have to add anything to it, unless and until those are that they are related to, or that is something to do with basics of information security, like confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? Yeah. So we have a few, many slides to cover. So my humble request, Narendra and everyone, is that you please park your questions. Once we are done with the whatever that, this particular session, we I think we should have something around um, at least 10 minutes, and then we will take the questions. I hope it's okay. Okay. So I'm sure whenever you're practicing, you would have seen these type of questions where often, they speak about the most important, right? Or they speak about the best way, right, of achieving something, or the primary goal of doing an activity, or what is the first step that you would take, right? Or the main aspect of a certain subject, right? Or what is the greatest benefit, right? So I'm sure you would have seen these kind of questions. Okay. So you would have to, when, so remember some time back we spoke about it, right? So when they say most, generally what happens is, or when they say the best, or when they say the primary, or when they say the main, or when they say the greatest, what happens is there would be more that it could be possible that there could be one of more than one answer to that particular question, one more than one right answer to that question. But the emphasis is what is most important, what is first. So for example, if you talk about uh, when you talk about risk management, right? Overall risk identification, risk assessment, okay, risk analysis, and risk evaluation, right? But what is the first step? What's the first step? Risk identification, right? So without identifying the risk, I cannot assess the risk. Without assessing, I cannot analyze, right? And for me, what comes prior to risk management? What's the first step, right? I need to have an asset inventory, right? And then I need to basically be able to do my information classification. I should have done all these things, right? Because if I do not know about my assets, I cannot really identify the risks. Correct? Agreed? You folks have gone through these concepts, right? So these are some of the points or terms which you will have to pay attention to in terms of the questions. It's very important, right? And because that basically decides whether you are choosing the right answer or not, right? So In continuation, you have to analyze the timelines or sequence. What is the first step? What comes immediately after that? What comes immediately after that? Right? You have to focus and you have to pay attention to aspects like the tense. Okay, when developing, like for example, while doing something versus after you have completed the activity, obviously the answers would vary, right? And always make sure that scope is something that you pay attention to. For example, you look at a RACI matrix, right? Responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So, who basically is responsible to do it, and who basically is, accountable to get things done, and who is just informed? You should be able to, I will not say memorize things, but you should have an understanding of that. Okay, and most even more important point is policies, right? So when you talk about policies, when you talk about procedures, okay, I do have a document, right? So you need to always keep in mind from as an information security manager, and we'll quickly look at that part also. If something is written, it doesn't mean it is correct or it is followed. You have to verify that. You have to verify that. And there are different ways and means of verifying it, for every single aspect. Okay. And again, usually the answer which is the most encompassing is always the best answer. Okay. And continuing to that, certain thumb rules. If there is a, if there is plan for a problem, or if there is any kind of a problem, right? You basically make sure that you initiate that particular plan. And when there is another thumb rule that you have to look at is in terms of sponsoring initiatives, it's always the highest in that particular organization, or whatever is the highest in ranking, right? In terms of those 3 4 answers, like let's say information security manager, CISO, CIO, and COO, who is best suited to be a sponsor? So the information security manager, chief information security officer, chief information officer, and a COO. If you look at these 4 roles, the highest is a COO, and he is better suited for sponsoring initiatives, right? But if you add, may I request you all folks to just go on mute, please?
Hello.
When you talk about certain, conditioned or unconditioned, right? So when you talk about it, something is never done, or it's all included, or it's always, considered, right? They're not the answers. And most importantly, management, when you specifically talk about management or senior management, right? That is the answer only in specific cases, right? In other cases, it's not, right? So we will go through a few examples, right? And when you talk about the questions, there would be certain questions where there would be, in terms of the answers, there would be certain mentioning of best practices, international standards, right? uh, they are not generally the answers. When you talk about an organization, you talk about organization's policies and procedures, right? If you speak about regulation, if they talk about legal, then it's a different point. But generally, if they talk about, I do what my peer is doing, I do what my competitor is doing. No, that's not generally the right answer. Okay, and please make sure that you understand the RACI metrics very clearly. Okay, so that is where you will be able to start noticing the difference between ensuring, responsible for, as opposed to doing stuff. Remember, you are going to attempt the exam for certified information security manager. So irrespective of what your current role is, you may be a developer, right? You may be a, security operations center manager or an analyst. You could be an information security manager in current role, right? or any, or you could be part of IT infrastructure. So irrespective of whatever role that you are currently in, make sure that you think only like an information security manager. Go back to the four domains. Do not come out of that, right? So unlearn, as far as the exam is concerned, unlearn, try to unlearn everything as to what you currently do in an organization. The practical world is definitely different, right? But ISACA and CISM specifically doesn't test you as to what you are doing in your organization, but it basically tests you, in terms of what the prescribed and suggested way of making sure that you safeguard your enterprise, your organization, right? Finally, when you speak about management, right? So when is, you said management is usually not, or not always, the answer, but then when is management the answer, right? When we speak about ultimate responsibility, right? When we speak about resolving issues at an organization level, right? If security team and IT team are having a fight, HR and sales are having a fight, right? Who basically is going to resolve that? Who can ensure commitment to security? Who owns all the policies? Who makes sure that they provide the oversight? That's senior management for you folks, right? So these are few guidelines, things to keep in mind when you are talking about the exam, right? When you're looking at the question. Now let's look at a few questions or few samples. Okay. Now something which is related to timeline in terms of, like, for example, sequence, right? What happens first? What happens next? While the question definitely does not speak about which one is the first step, right? So here it is asking you the question, at which point will decisions be made to accept a risk? Issue identification, sorry, risk identification, risk assessment, risk analysis, and risk evaluation, right? So it's in the risk evaluation stage is where you basically accept the risk. And similarly, you have to pay attention to the tense, as in what is the activity, tense of that particular verb, right? I'm so sorry, this is not, this may sound as an English exam, but sometimes your English is also tested, right? Because that's the that's the context basis which the activity differs. The most important consideration when developing policies is that management signs off, they are based on threats, there is consistency with standards, and no significant detail is omitted. Now, what is the activity that you're doing? You're developing the policies. So it's not yet done, right? Exactly, you fell into the pit. That particular pit which was set for you, right? You fell into that straight, right? You're currently working on it. You are not yet completed the activity, right? So this is not about having things like having your end in mind. Okay, so you're talking about they are based on threats, or there is no significant detail is omitted, right? There is management sign off. No, right? So there should be some consistency with your standard. That's the right answer. C is the right answer here. Okay, so when you are giving answers also, please make sure that you don't fall into that particular pit, right? And that's the reason why we kind of chose these questions, to give these questions as an example. You need to specifically pay attention to the tense of what is the activity which is being done. You are developing the policy. At the time of developing the policy, as in that activity is going on, when the activity is going on, what should you consider? I should consider the management signs off. Oh, I hope that they sign it. I mean, it doesn't really make sense. Is it not? It's not fitting the bill. They are based on the threats. Okay, fair point. Correct. Right? No significant detail is omitted. That's like an underlying thing. It's, yeah, it's there, right? It's like a sauce packet when it, which is given along with a bunch, with a pack of fries. It's like a given thing, right? So that is basically applicable for every, pretty much every step. However, if you look at it between B and C, the most important consideration is that there should be some consistency. If I do that, then I will basically make sure that, or I can make sure that the management signs off. There is a greater success of whatever is the outcome that I am expecting if I make sure that I practice C when developing the policy. Agreed? So that's how you will have to approach the questions. Let's look at scope, another example. Okay, a business impact assessment, a BIA, right, primarily provides information on which of the following. You'll have to, the key area or key term here is primarily. Risk to the organization, escalation of loss over time, maximum tolerable outage, organizations, vulnerability. Business impact assessment, right? So it primarily, why is it that I do a BIA? That's the most important thing. Okay, business impact assessment. You basically you do prioritization. When you do prioritization, you basically are talking about what is more, which particular asset and which particular service has what kind of an impact when there is an issue with respect to availability or a confidentiality or integrity. So escalation of loss over time is the primary thing. Risk to the organization, of course, yes, agreed, right? Maximum tolerable outage, MTO, it's actually not the only thing. MTO, RPO, RTO, there are multiple aspects that you basically select, and you can include them as part of your BIA. But my escalation of loss over time, loss, business loss, okay, C does not give me the loss. C basically tells me how much I can tolerate, that's it. But why is something very important, that is the primary output of the BIA, isn't it? BIA, I do a BIA across multiple business units in the organization, basically to understand, I prioritize which particular service, which particular business is more important than the other. How exactly the escalation of loss over every single minute, every single hour basically looks like for the entire enterprise, right? So that's why B is the right answer here for that question. And similarly, when you look at scope, you're talking about another example where the most encompassing answer is something that you need to look at. And the question, the most important consideration when contracting with a service provider is personally identifiable information, right to audit, service levels, escalation, and notification. The point here is the most encompassing. Okay, personally identifiable information versus service provider. Yes, as all of you understood, A is not the right answer. Okay, now let's look at it. Right to audit, perfectly yes. It is absolutely apt. Escalation and notification, that is also the right answer. However, these two can basically be part of your service level agreement, which is C, service levels. So that's what we're talking about, the most encompassing thing. It's not that B and D are right, wrong answers, team. But when you talk about a service level agreement, it includes right to audit and escalation and notification, right? That's why I would choose C as the right answer. Okay, let's look at a few other examples. Okay, next thing is outcome oriented question, right? An effective security program will be. assigning roles and responsibilities, achieve acceptable impact, standardize risk assessment, develop complete control objective. The effectiveness of security program, basically, what is the role of a security manager and a security program? To manage the risk effectively, correct? And what is effective risk management? By making sure that the impact of all the risks are always at acceptable level, correct? That's what we've all studied as part of domain 1 and domain 2, right? Governance and risk management both, correct? So when you look at assigning roles and responsibilities, standardizing risk assessment, developing complete control objectives, remember, all encompassing answer. What is basically the ultimate goal of why do you have a security program in place, right? The underlying agenda is to manage risks effectively. So, and what exactly is effective risk management? When you always manage the impact at an acceptable level, nothing goes beyond acceptable limit for the enterprise. That's the reason why B is the right answer. Okay, same is the case with another example, which is basis writing things. Policy compliance is best ensured or assured by penalty clause for non-compliance, complete acceptable use policy, regular security review, periodic awareness campaigns. Remember, I was talking about writing is not enough. You have to go look and verify, correct? So what is the best example? So best answer here. Yeah, great job, team. Yes, as majority of you were selecting, C is the right answer, right? In terms of here we're talking about writing is not enough. You have to go look, verify. That's what I was talking about, right? So that was a hint that I was trying to give you. Okay, you have to go look and verify. Now, anything that you do from a culture and culture perspective as a, any in any organization, when you start talking immediately about penalty clauses for non-compliance, what are you going to penalize people on? Okay, I'm going to penalize you on your KPIs, your performance. It's a deterrence, right? People would not be basically be happy with it, right? Completing acceptable use policy. I mean, okay, fine. You are not talking about people signing something here. You're talking about an acceptable usage policy, which is a complete one. It's definitely not going to help me, right? Regular security reviews. Let's park that. Okay. Periodic awareness campaigns. You're still telling people, right? There is a policy and you are making people aware of that policy. How are you going to provide assurance? Here the question, when I go look and verify. So that's what I do as part of a security review. And that's the reason why C is the right answer. So you're reading to the question. It's a pretty straightforward question. It's assurance, right? Assurance is achieved by making sure I'm looking and verifying that yes, everybody is in line or not. By saying that, okay, non-compliance, I'm going to penalize you, you are not going to get assurance. A scenario where the rules are not followed. Again, a continuation to the previous question. Sales department personnel regularly ignore a policy on leaving workstation unattended after logging in. The information security manager should first do what? Initiate enforcement action, notify department head of non-compliance, assess the risk of non-compliance, require manager to accept the risk. What would you do? You are the security manager. This is what you will be. There will be many questions where you'll be asked these kind of questions. Immediately, what would you do? Coming to the answer, right? So majority of you had selected either B or C. Okay. Now look at it in terms of the first step. Okay. When you're, look at it in terms of both an ideal scenario as well as a practical scenario. If you have to go ahead and notify the department head for non-compliance, the department head is not most likely to come back and tell you, okay, fine, there is a process, there is a policy. I agree. However, what would happen if they do? Why are you wasting my time? There is a most likely that they will be asking you this question. So what would you do? First, there is a policy that you should not leave your workstations unlocked or unattended. So you have to always lock and leave. But if they are still leaving, then what would you do? What should you do? I should first assess the risk of non-compliance. When I assess the risk, when I'll be able to quantify that particular risk, I go back and notify the department head that there is this particular risk. And then I come back and say, okay, if you still don't want to follow, fair point, then accept the risk. Or by the powers vested in me by the senior management, I hereby am enforcing the actions. Anything which is left unattended by more than 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 180 seconds, blah, 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 whatever timeline it is, it automatically locks. Okay. The next part, as we were talking about, the sponsor part, right? Always the highest. We took one example. Okay. Which of the following would be or who among the following would be the best sponsor for a major security initiative, right? CISO, COO, CIO, CTO. Who would be the best sponsor? What did we speak? Okay. But I would strongly recommend that please go through the answers and then provide the, in the exam also. Okay. It's very important that you look at the answers. I mean, sometimes what happens is, let's say you am replacing CTO with CEO, then what would happen? Then who would be the best sponsor? CEO, right? Because CEO is the highest then. So please make sure that you pay attention to that, as to whoever is the highest in terms of ranking is the best always to provide any kind of sponsorship. Okay. Management often not the answer, right? So this is what we were talking about. Classification of information resources is primarily responsibility of senior management, data custodian, originator of data, information security officer. Whose responsibility is to classify the data or information? And this is where it becomes very important that you understand the terms. Remember, that's the other part. Don't assume anything. If you do not know the meaning of your terms, it's very important. Primary responsibility of data classification. Because sometimes the answer is hidden in plain English. The originator of data, right? And another part is, it also becomes kind of, I mean, look at it this way. Uh, you have to look at a specific scenario kind of a thing. You have to envision that when you're not clear, right? When you're not sure, let's say you're not sure, yeah, who should do it. Okay. You're talking about, let's say there is a person in finance department in your organization who's just created a Word document. This is a piece of data and piece of information. Yes. Now who should be classifying that? And you are the information security officer. Let's put yourself in that. Your friend who is the CIO, or who is basically managing the whole data center, is your that's your friend. And then you have CEO, senior management, whoever it is, and then the person who is from finance department. Now, amongst these four, who should be classifying? Your friend is the data custodian. Who is the data custodian? A data custodian is basically the person who's facilitating the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of that particular data for any kind of usage, right? Information security officer, you are responsible for safeguarding and managing the risks of the organization. Senior management, CEO. Now, a person like this particular gentleman or lady who is there in the in the finance department, who's just prepared a Word document, there are 100,000 other people across your organization who are creating similar kind of documents. Now, whether you or your friend or the CEO, will you sit there and classify every single document? Would you? No, right? So who's best here? The person who's creating that, originating that, correct? A person who's creating a piece of information, it's always the best one and the right one to classify any kind of a document instead of the other roles which are mentioned here, right? Next is unconditioned, never, all, always, not the answer, right? So let's look at it this way. To address legal and security requirements, the information security manager should ensure policies cover all legal and regulatory requirements, adopt international security standards, confer with corporate counsel, assess risk of non-compliance. Assess the risk of non-compliance, confer with corporate counsel, okay, adopt international security standards. Remember, best practices, international security standards, these are generally not the answers, as I told you, right? Just some time back. Okay. And also, when you talk about all, everything, never, no, all these things are not generally not the answers. So that would basically remove A and B, right? Now confer with corporate counsel and assess the risk of non-compliance. So when you talk about any kind of a legal and regulatory security requirements, what would you do and what should you do? What's the best option here? All encompassing. Great. Yes. D is the right answer. And if you're not sure for these kind of requirements, right, or for these kind of questions, I would put it this way. When you talk about any legal or regulatory security requirements, right, what I would say is, or what I would look at it is like, imagine that, you have to break the law, for whatever reason. And ideally, I would not give those extreme examples, but you are just thinking only about it, right? So that's where I'm just taking the liberty, right? So you're talking about breaking a signal, breaking the law, because you are basically jumping a signal. You are there on a bike or a car or whatever, right? Now it's important that you have to reach your destination, so you have to basically jump the signal. That has come to your requirement, as a requirement. Now if you jump the signal, what would you immediately think? What would happen if I jump the signal? It's red, I should not cross. What would happen if I cross a red signal? Isn't the first thing that comes to your mind? Yes, no, maybe. Correct? That's what would happen. Yes, I should not do. But here I am in a situation where I have to do it because there is something, there is an emergency that I have to go. So, what would you think? What would you see? Okay, what is my risk of non-compliance? If I don't comply with that law of not jumping with, or not jumping that particular red signal, if I don't comply with that, what would happen? Would there be a fine? Somebody is going to catch me, somebody is going to throw me into jail. Okay, so I will have to, first thing is something that I would look at that only, right? And think about those kind of examples. And this is something that you have to train yourself when you're practicing. Remember, only because, and here this is where it becomes very difficult. And of course, I have passed CISM as well, and I've crossed that bridge, so I know what exactly a person goes through. You're part of a role in the office, so because you are working and you've been working in those roles for many years, and CISM requirement itself that you should have at least 5 years of experience. So, given the fact that you are in a work environment for a minimum of 5 years at least, your thought process is streamlined. So, you have to unlearn that particular thing and then think the way Isaka wants you to think. It's very important, right? Now, that particular thought process doesn't come overnight, right? So, whether you are reading through or whether you are going through the whether you're going through the questions, whether you're going through your review manuals, whether you're going through training related recordings, every single time make sure that you register these things in mind, right? And as I said, certain aspects is something that a trainer would share with you. However, if you look at it, everything cannot be shared by the trainer. Certain aspects you will have to make it, your own way of either remembering something or way that you can relate to it. So those aspects, right? Now, moving on to the next part, after the questions thing, right? So those are few scenario or examples that we actually thought it would be important that we share it with everyone who is thinking of writing the exam, right? Now the most important point is always think like a manager, right? Aligning security with business goals, that's the most important part. That's what we go through as part of governance, as part of risk management, as part of pretty much every single domain, right? The underlying concept is always that, right? So there is always an integration at a strategy level, right? You're managing the risk. Why are you managing the risk? So that the business impact for the organization is always maintained at an acceptable limit. You're creating and you are adding value to the business, right? So you have to start thinking like a manager when you are attempting the questions, even when you're practicing, right? There are, and the next part on those lines is the raci metrics, and that's where your decision making part and governance aspect comes into picture, right? So you're talking there about your policy development, compliance and legal part, right? And resource management. Remember, you're talking about value creation and resource management, two most important part. Because, and when you say resource, it's not just people, right? You're talking about both people and technical and every other kind of a resource, money. So you're allocating resources efficiently to make sure that you're achieving your objective. Make sure that you at any point in time you are adhering to legal and regulatory requirements basis the risk assessment, right? And then overall risk management part, making sure that risk assessment is always a continuous process, so that you are identifying and you are looking at threat analysis, threat hunting and threat identification is a regular process. It's not just a one time activity, or it's not a tick in the box activity. And now that you've assessed, analyzed risks, right, risk mitigation part, how exactly you are making sure that you have your technical controls implemented, you have your administrative controls implemented. How are you going to monitor them? And when something, uh, beg your pardon, what feedback form? Sorry, Saraf. Okay, next part is risk communication aspect, right? So while you are looking at risk assessment and risk mitigation, making sure that the risk related communication, okay, uh, making sure that those risk levels, okay, the mitigation strategies, all these are informed regularly to the stakeholders. Okay, so you at the end of the day, right, when you are talking about uh, uh, okay, that would be shared. I'm so sorry, I didn't know that. Okay, so Anas is there and you have the details there, right? So the incident management part, okay, so incident response planning, coordination, communication, post incident analysis. So these are few aspects. When you are looking at a manager, you are looking at a bigger picture. Same is the case with respect to performance metrics, okay, and where you are talking about KPI development, KPI, and you're always looking at better KPIs, okay, and continuous improvement. And you're talking about making sure that the reporting part is correctly done, okay. And finally, study smart, understand the concepts well, right? If you just go on about memorizing things without thinking like a manager and without connecting the dots, it's going to be very, very difficult. And that, as I told you, comes with a lot of practice. When you, the more questions that you practice, the more you familiarize with these terms. Like for example, sometime back we looked at data custodian, right? Now it's very important that you understand the term data custodian, right? Data owner, data custodian. So these are a few terms that you have to keep in mind and you understand these terms, right? And you know, if you are not doing it, if you are not amidst the entire process and that thought process, it would be difficult for you to get over and get over the line, because on that day, the moment the first question or the second question or the third question hits you, that okay, oh, I did not understand this question, oh, I did not under, like that, if there are 5 or 10 questions, then it may have very demoralizing effect on you, right? So to avoid that is where you're practicing as many questions, you're familiarizing yourself with a lot of these concepts, terms, right? Making sure that you're training your mind to think like a manager, to perform scenario analysis, right? So it's very impactful, and it's very important that where I would definitely recommend that each and every one of you who is looking at attempting this particular exam, you look at it that way. You go ahead and attack it that way. Preparation related resources, okay. The official review manual and the QAD database and the CISM review course is what the first and the foremost thing that I would strongly recommend. Okay. Any training providers like InfoSec Train is something that you could look at. However, when you are looking at picking up any questions from third parties, please be wary, because any kind of mock exams which are available out there, uh, you know they may provide you with uh, a flawed or a half-baked justification and their answers, so you may not get the right kind of infuse of information. So please start always with ISACA provided and ISACA prescribed content, and then once you reach a certain stage is where after being part of a group, or if you are any kind of an online forum, you read enough on ISACA forums, then yes, you may pick one or two mock exams which are available out there, right? And finally, the most important part, if you're not already part of the world of information security, there may be question or two or maybe more in the exam, which are kind of related to the latest security trends, right? They may ask you, they may throw some jargon at you as an information security manager, right? Which is related to maybe an incident which would have happened, some kind of an issue, uh, some kind of a question which may be looking at culture or things like that. So it's very, very important that you stay up to date with industry trends, be part of these forums, be participate, read through, read. It's very important, okay. And so that's what I would strongly recommend, okay. So for those of you who are attending this for um, this particular session, that is for giving the exam in the near future, this is what I would recommend. So wish you all the very best. Thank you so much for attending this session. I hope it was useful to you. That's all from me, right? So I will share the content with Anas, and he can you can reach out to him for more information. So again, wish you all the very best. Prepare well,